Like to call the June 17th, 2025 meeting of the Rogue Community College Board of Education special meeting. We do not have a quorum, but we don't need a quorum this evening because we are not making any decisions. Is that right, Randy?
That's correct.
All right. Why don't we introduce our guests? So we'll start with Cass.
I am Cass Sinclair, Executive Director of the Foundation.
Lisa Stanton, Vice President of Operations and Finance.
Lisa Parks, Business and Workforce.
Isam Mohammed, Executive Director, Institutional Effectiveness and Planning.
April Hamlin, Dean of Student Success.
Dave Kohler, Dean of Instruction, Health and Public Service. And I'd like to point out something, that will be the last time Dave will be introducing himself, at least in that way. At future meetings, Dave will be recognized as our new Vice President and Provost.
All right, so on our special meeting agenda, we have a capital planning strategy presentation. And I see Lisa and Cass eager and ready to launch that. So
Thank you, Gary. So we will get started. We're going to talk about capital projects update, but what I really wanted to start with was last month, Greg brought forward a presentation about capital outlay, where he walked through our entire 5-year capital plan and brought all of that information to you. And so I wanted to bring this back to your attention. And this is the 5-year plan summary. It doesn't include the capital construction in it, but this is where we left at our last meeting. And what we're going to talk about tonight is our priority capital construction projects. So as we start, I wanted to start with a definition of what those are. Essentially, it's projects that have significant campus development initiatives that are identified through master planning and our long-term efforts, right? And we engage in a large-scale design. So e-building that we just toured earlier today, that is one of a capital construction. That was a remodel of that building. And then when we look at funding sources, typically when we're talking about our 5-year, I'm going to go back to this page. Planning, so how we're doing our maintenance and our renewal, we're using operating funds, and for capital construction, we're using typically non-operating funds. So think grants, a capital campaign, general obligation bonds. They can be backed by property taxes, or they could be backed by operational dollars if we so chose. And then there's other funding sources outside of that, but typically it's not fully supported by your operating dollars. If we want to launch into priority projects, and we have 3 different levels of priority. And our first priority project is the transportation centers. So one for Redwood and one for Table Rock. And so I want to talk a little about the funding really quickly, and then I'm going to go back in and talk about the project itself. And so this is a project that's been on our books for many, many years. We actually received a $7.1 million grant from the state of Oregon through community colleges for this particular project. And then it's a matching grant. So we have to match those funds. And so right now we're matching those funds with reinvestment dollars that we have at the college. So when we're looking at this particular, go ahead, Roger.
Just a quick question. Mechanically, where are those dollars now? Do we have them, or are they state commitment, or?
So the state actually has sold the bonds. They sold them this spring. So they are sitting in their bank account waiting for us to draw down the funds. The college's dollars are actually in an account.
No, I understand that. I was just thinking, okay, if we had that $7 million, that ought to be generating some interest. It doesn't work that way.
They're generating the interest, and it's actually $7 million available for the capital project, $100,000 of that. So it's a $7.1 million grant. $100,000 actually pays for the issuance of the bond and the maintenance.
They won't actually sell those bonds because we've been approved for years. They won't sell those bonds until we've taken our match money and put it in a dedicated storage. So they're like, okay, now you're ready.
Yeah, show me your money.
So yeah, so it's not a problem.
Got it. So, but the $9 million, it's our money, that draws interest.
Has drawn interest. When we're looking at these two projects, it's one big project, but two different buildings, one on each campus. We're gonna be designing these based on what makes sense for each location. We are going to be using the existing equipment we have in these buildings as appropriate. And within the slide there, you can see, look through some of the things that we're moving forward with is having a decade-long vision so that we can move into the space and utilize it for a long period of time. We want to make sure it's adaptable. We know that within this industry, things are changing. Electric cars are coming more, so we'll need space for that. And then other types of fuel alternatives are coming as well. You want to have it go ahead.
Well, I was gonna ask you, what are you doing for to make silver, the lead silver?
That is a great question that I cannot answer all of the details on that, Pat, but I can bring that back
Okay.
with Greg. So it's built in there, so we will not go out for the certificate itself, but all of our construction standards are that way. And we are still early in the design phase, so we're just starting those conversations.
Well, that's what gets to my question. It seems to me, at least a couple meetings ago, we approved the going into the design phase. How's that coming?
We have had 2 meetings thus far, so it's going wonderful from my perspective at this
Okay.
point. So we were out on site a few weeks ago where the architects and the contractor came out and we walked the Table Rock site, and then they came over here and they walked the Redwood site. And then our last meeting was just really talking about some of the things that are listing here and putting together a charter for the project.
So you don't have even a sketch of the layout or, what they've got in mind?
We have seen sketches, but we're a long way off from an actual layout.
Sure. The faculty, are they involved yet as far as that doesn't make sense to put that here, put it over here, those kind of things?
So they're working directly with Steve. Right now, we're still at that higher level where we're just trying to get the concepts of which direction we're going, how we're laying out the building and the needs for the Table Rock campus versus the Redwood campus.
Steve's the dean and he's very close with them. One of the things that he's done that they're really embracing is merging auto and diesel in a way that people can get 1 degree and have some of both. And so I think that he's representing them in a pretty inclusive way, but I'm sure as they get into the design and that will be a little more.
That's why I asked. I know that you've done that process with the health building and whatever, and you obviously you get a lot of good feedback from the folks that are actually on the ground trying to make it work.
Yeah, so there'll be internal discussions. There'll also be stakeholder discussions, so they'll be very well rounded for the whole project. Or
Thank
both
you.
projects. Mhm. So within the slide, I do want to point out that there is additional room or more room at the Table Rock campus than there is at the Redwood campus. So the building at the Table Rock campus will likely be larger than the one here on this campus. We still have the ability for students to start and potentially get their degree here at the Redwood campus, but also then at the Table Rock campus, the same thing. One of the things the Table Rock campus, though, because there is additional space, is some specializations. We'll have space for those specializations over there, where we probably won't have that same space over here. And this is a concept that has been continuing here at the college. When we think about the Allied Health Center, our Allied Health Center in Table Rock is larger than the one at Redwood. And then we also have the High Technology Center at Table Rock, and then we also have the program over here on a smaller scale. So that's how we're designing those 2 buildings. Go ahead.
Is there transportation potential because some students are in Cape Junction, which is another 40 minutes out, and then to go to Table Rock's a long way. Is there any thought about, for gas, which is going up 50 cents a gallon, by the way, soon, for how they would get there for these specializations that they wouldn't have to drive that way?
Yeah, I think that's a great question.
So in general, what we offer at Table Rock has always been a challenge for people, particularly living in the Illinois Valley. Like we know that you'll see a student tonight who can tell that story at the next meeting. It becomes a numbers game where, right, 70% of our population live in one area, 30% of our population live in another. And what we've really tried to do with these program decisions is to provide access so they can get as much of it as possible at both places. And that's really where we've gone here. And then where we're doing very specific things, it's one where the concentration of population is, but it's also the area where local industry is willing to invest. I mean, we've really seen, I will just say, when we initially talked about this project and its initial design and solely at Redwood, there was a lot less industry enthusiasm when we said we're going to put it at both campuses to make it accessible. Now that we have a presence at Table Rock, we're seeing industry headquartered in Jackson County or coming to the table saying, well, for that, we're willing to invest. So that's one of the limitations of our district is geography, right? So students from Cape Junction going to Table Rock, it's difficult. Students from Shady Cove coming to Grants Pass, it's difficult. And so we try to mitigate that to the best we can. One of the things that Steve has said to that point, and he's not here tonight, he's at a different opportunity, is that this won't prevent us from taking time to time some of those classes in Grants Pass if we get enough demand and we're able to find an instructor that is going to be designed in a way where it's got some of that flexibility.
I think just bringing that, I think we need to think about that going forward because RCC started here. It's a source of really real community pride here. If we start seeing more and more where you have to go out to Table Rock, I think it's going to disenfranchise the community here, and I would hate to see that.
My response to that would be, we're still making significant investments here.
Yeah.
I mean, we were just touring an Allied Health. Again, it's proportionately, Josephine County is getting as much investment as it's putting into the entire district. And so I don't think that it's just a reality of of dealing with that. So by allowing students to still get the automotive degree here, but part of the challenge is not acknowledging that 70% of our population is in part of another part of the district. And so we've been moving that, having conversations. We continue to talk about, and we're derailing kind of from the conversation here, but I think it's an important concept of how we think about where programs lie within the district. As we've continued to have conversations throughout Josephine County, because one of our challenges is Jackson County is eagerly coming to the table as industry saying, how can we help you to build programs for our future workforce? And Josephine County is not doing that as much.
They're so much bigger.
Well, I understand that, but that's where we have to then provide the opportunity. So that's where that's why the opportunity is aligned with where I can't get them to invest in Josephine County. So it's still easier for a student from Illinois Valley to drive to Table Rock than it is to drive to Eugene or Lynn Fenton. So I'd rather offer it at Table Rock, where we can at least get some industry support versus saying, well, the only way you're going to get that education is to drive up to Corvallis.
Maybe we have dorms over there.
There's always options.
That's thinking out of the box. I mean, that's, it's out of the box thinking, but it's thinking that could happen in the future, right?
Yeah, so I want to move over into talking about capital campaign feasibility, and I'm going to turn that over to Cass in just a second. You had asked the layout, and so on this slide, there is a layout of what looks like this is very early design. So I can say that the design has changed a little bit. And again, when we're looking at this particular design, there's not a lot of flexibility with a classroom right in the middle. And so we're talking about more flexibility, being able to move between I don't remember all the diesel sizes, but the smaller diesel, right, and automotive and back and forth, so that there is flexibility to grow one of the two programs or shrink as it's occurring. So that will be at both campuses.
So you're talking about specialized things in the automotive and diesel. So one of those I can imagine would be trailer repairs, because there's a lot of specialized trailers, tankers, gondolas, what have you. That kind of thing that we're talking about.
I would need Steve to be here to
Yeah,
answer.
yeah.
I apologize.
He has talked about future vision, no commitment. It would be like around like auto body and
Yeah.
stuff like that potentially. Yeah.
There's a lot
Part of
of,
it is what the design concept will do is our architects have really challenged us to say, build as comprehensive and big of a shell as you can.
yeah,
And then challenge your industry to help you fill it.
yeah.
And so then part of it's gonna come to them and say, what do you want? What do you want in workforce training? And so they're gonna drive part of what comes in the building based on what workforce they want, what equipment they're willing to help provide toward that. And what the architect's doing is saying, don't spend a lot of money on your equipment, spend on your building so you don't outgrow it in short time.
Do they work complementary like the truck driving school and the diesel technology? Because there's maintenance, all sorts of stuff that you need to teach the truck drivers too. So, you know,
There's a fair amount of overlap, but Steve would be the best one
Yeah.
to speak to that versus anybody in the room.
right.
So the one thing I forgot that I will say is, we are going to put pre-manufactured metal buildings up for these two locations. And so we need to, we'll be bringing, that board resolution to purchase those buildings after the design phase, or right in the middle. It's about 50% done. And that's when we'll make the decision of the actual sizes of the two buildings. And again, as Dr. River was talking, right, we want to make sure that we have enough space.
Yeah.
The extras, extra awnings or different things, we can add those later. Newer equipment, we can go out for grants later. Right now, we want to get the infrastructure in so that they can grow. Rather than spending additional millions of dollars to expand that building in 5 or 7 years from now. So having that solid foundation. So now I will turn it over to you.
Lisa.
Thank you, sorry.
So as Lisa brought to your attention at the beginning, there are priority 1, 2, and 3 projects. So I'll be talking about the priority 1 project, which is the transportation center, and how the foundation will support efforts. So if I can draw your attention to the feasibility and planning framework in your paperwork up there. We'll start with the feasibility study phase, and that's really to identify and assess the community interest and the donor capacity and the industry need. The key actions of the feasibility study are we'll engage a consultant to lead the feasibility study, and then we'll conduct those interviews. And those interviews will be with all of the employers, the local employers, the industry, community partners, executive leadership, and philanthropists and foundations. And then we'll gather the data on all the regional labor demand and those student interests and success rates and the comparable centers in similar regions. The deliverables will be the feasibility report, and that's going to show the readiness and the appetite for giving and those community industry alignment, the grant funding potential from state and private entities, and recommendations on goal size, phases, and risks. Then from that, we'll be able to pull a case for support. So then we'll look at what are the messaging themes, what comes out of the feasibility. And so it'll be, for example, and this is a draft, solving regional workforce shortages in transportation tech, looking at RCC's record and numbers in job training and student advancement and the impact on economic development and employer needs, and then the alignment with state workforce priorities. Then we'll move into the components of that, which is the draft capital budget, including as these things arise, what will be the budget for the construction equipment and startup, and then outlining naming opportunities, and then the integration of grant revenue, which will be part of the campaign pillar, one of the legs of the campaign. From there, we will look at state and capital funding, workforce grants, and private foundations, and then coming up with the campaign plan elements and how we will look at the different funding streams, and then look at the structure of how that campaign will run. So usually there's that quiet phase, that lead in. What are you starting with? What are the big gifts that you have in grants? And then moving into a public phase, which would be events and press releases, social media, and then the community phase where we're really blasting this to the entire community of Josephine and Jackson counties. From there, we'll look at our engagement tools and the campaign leadership committee, the donor stewardship, and then branded materials, all those branded materials that it takes to start a campaign. And then we'll invite the industry and grant partner engagement. From there, I've attached a draft case for support, again, a draft. And just kind of the highlights. This is what we would take to our e-philanthropists and groups about what is the need, what's the need in the community, why are we doing this? And I won't read it verbatim, but you've seen it. So it gives the vision, why are we doing this? What's the need? And then what's the opportunity? It then talks about the funding plan and the grants and the impact. This is where you're really bringing the information and showing people why do we need this here at Rogue Community College. One of the things Lisa will be talking about further on is opportunity for naming opportunities. And so I've just given you what it could look like to have naming opportunities. And this is a really big way to get those major gifts and help fund the project.
I can pause it now. It's on the last slide, but I'll
No,
talk about it right now. So administrative policy 6620 talks about naming of buildings. And so what we're working on right now is modifying that so we can name more than just an entire building. We can name a classroom or a space or a large portion of the building or a piece of outdoors, the like I say, the fountain area or something like that. So modifying that administrative procedure will allow us more opportunity, like Cass has put here in front of us. And so that will run through our policy and procedures process here at the college, and then we will bring that for you to see as soon as it's ready.
So I just wanted to check in my thinking, be sure that I'm thinking about this correctly. So the way that Lisa described the early portion, which is the space accommodations, the actual footprint of the buildings, how much space we could have at each of the campuses. This portion of the capital campaign, is it likely that, am I thinking correctly, that it will buy all of the things that will go into that infrastructure of the footprint of what Lisa was describing?
I'm gonna take.
So I think it's yes, and
Okay.
there's an opportunity to replace some of the dollars that we're investing. So one of the grants that we'll be looking at is an EDA grant and asking for around 1.5 million. We could replace some of our $9 million
Yeah.
with the EDA grant, which would be, that way we have that 1.5 million for our other priority projects.
I wanted to be sure. I thought that that's likely would be something that could happen. But this is, I think, the right way to go about a brand new program that you're building from scratch, not having somebody that give you all the resources up front, but you have to build it brick at a time. And so this is a way for somebody with some deep pockets potentially to say, you know, I am so invested in what you're doing. I want to add to this, and maybe the building name could change potentially depending on the size of the gift.
There's a delicate balance we'll be walking between trying, how do we buy down our direct contribution that we've made versus how might we scope up the project to do things that we wouldn't otherwise based on this support. And a lot of that will depend on what are we committed to doing. And somebody says, this alternative that you have over here that we never would have committed within ours, I want to do that, then we need them to fund that fully. If somebody says, oh, I like what you're doing, I just want to name this classroom, then that would like buy down our contribution.
And I like that term. I think that's a really good way to frame what this project is about, is sort of buying it down. And it speaks to the community's response to the college relative to the bond that failed, because there would have been a big funding stream, but that didn't happen. So this is now that iterative approach, and potentially why you're looking at larger population centers, because that's where the people and the money are, as opposed to looking solely at one county versus the other county. Is that right?
And I was going to bring this up later, but I'll bring this up now. Again, the state funds that we're receiving for capital, we only have certain times in which we can apply for those funds for Rogue. It's all 17 community colleges working together and we all have our years. And so the next time that we can apply is for the 27-29 biennium. But we can't apply until we spend the funds we've already been awarded. And so we can't move on for additional funds until we spend these. And that's why we needed to provide the matching funds. So now we have that opportunity to buy Diane. So it's one more reason it provides additional funds in the future for us as well. I'm going to move on to priority 2 projects. And again, for those that have it printed out that weren't here, I did make a small mistake under RWC. It says renovation of the electronics for EMT. It should be renovation of the automotive for EMS. And so when we're looking at this, one of the things is really wanting to enhance the space we currently have or start using space that we currently have. And so I'll just kind of go through each one of these. These overall projects are about $21 million plus. Again, we haven't fully vetted all of the details. In addition, as you know, with tariffs and different things happening in the world right now, prices are changing. And so again, this is an estimate based on what we know right now today. Within this also, the reason I brought back and reminded you of Greg's presentation last month was some of the deferred maintenance or recurring costs as we upgrade some of these other buildings. Those will be taken into account and paid for with these projects as well. So when we look at Redwood campus, and I apologize, it's printed in yellow and it's very light on your page, but I was trying to highlight the buildings so you could see what we were talking about within the slide. So at the Redwood campus, we're looking at repurposing what the automotive lab is currently. One of the issues, and it's in that first picture there that we have with the automotive lab, is it's actually 2 stories. And to bring it up to be compliant, we actually put in a lift. It's not very user-friendly to really make the building accessible and easily to use would be a very, very, very large investment. So what we're looking at doing is the part of the building that's in red, we would demolish that and add in a parking lot. And the part that's in yellow, we would remodel that and have it for lab space for the EMS program. So currently EMS is over in Josephine County. They're using one of the Coates Hall classrooms. They will be moving into the electronic space with no cost changes. We're going to move the furniture and items out and they'll be in there, but they really need more of a lab space. And so that's where we would like to remodel the lower portion of the building that was automotive for them.
So the building won't come down.
The first
The upper part.
upper part. Now there again, we haven't looked at does the electrical come in from the upper part or the lower part? There's lots of things that we still need to look at cost-wise and really dig into that. But with the e-building coming on, so Allied Health, more students will be there. We'll also have more students in the transportation area. We will need more parking on that northeast side of the campus. And so that's where it would be. Also, I was in the building right to the left or right across the street. It's very narrow. And so that would open up space for walk in, also driving through. So little safety there as well.
Is the building in the red box one of the original buildings from the college? Yeah, okay.
To my knowledge, yes, I believe so.
I don't think he gets a good score on.
He doesn't get a good score.
Nothing that we've invested money in that we would later. I've invested, of course.
We've invested, but it's
It's minimal compared to a major remodel.
correct. And that's why when we look at the decisions we made, we had, I'm going to call it a civil rights audit where they came down and that's why the Rogue Bowl, we had to make that ADA compliant. This was one of the other buildings we needed to make ADA compliant. And we looked at it, that's why those lifts are in there. It was too expensive to do it a different way. So if we remove it, we don't have that issue going forward. So The second piece is TRCA for a priority 2 projects. And so I will walk through this. I tried to make the words and the parts of the building the same color so that you could see that. But I'm going to start at the bottom with the Rogue Central redesign. So within our bond levy campaign, one of the things we talked about was redesigning Rogue Central. And what we really would love to have is a building, a whole new building at the Table Rock campus. We were going to put it on our new property right next to D building. Our levy didn't pass, so we did have to make a different decision, because Rogue Central, being able to find Rogue Central, whether you're coming in from the west side of the building or the east side, whatever entrance you're coming in, being able to find Rogue Central is very important for new students. And so what we were able to do is come up with a concept of over there in the yellow on the left-hand side, moving Rogue Central from this area right here, expanding them down into the testing, what used to be a library area. The reason that we're doing that is students can come in this door that's already here. And then a small minor change by putting a door right here. The back door is coming from TRC is over, where my mouse is here. They could come in and see Rogue Central right here. So visible from both sides with a minor investment. So then I'm going to just keep going up from the bottom. The blue room, again, we have this large space. It is green, but that is our blue room. Again, we can make that 2 stories. The upper story we could have for administrative offices and area. There's 1 elevator. It's very small. It's hard to get to. So we want to make sure we don't have to have students going up and down. It's still accessible, but it wouldn't be friendly accessible to all our students. So leaving that for staff would be great. We can handle that. Having the lower level available for instructional space for students is what we're looking at. More classrooms, probably the offices down here. You know, some of our designs are removing these and just making four big classrooms. So again, we haven't vetted all of this out. These are things we're thinking about, but the lower story for students and classrooms.
Blue room. What was it called? The blue room?
Don't remember why, but we've always called it the blue room.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's like, if I'm wrong, I'm thinking it's like 12,000 square feet. And then if you develop it upstairs, it's like another
Oh,
8,
yeah.
like it's almost like 20,000 convertible
Yeah,
square.
I've been in
foot.
that room. It's huge.
Yeah, so that's a picture I was trying to show can be 2 stories there.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, what the concept is you'd divide this space somehow, because it's obviously got what, up 20 feet or so. And to put classrooms in there with 20 feet ceilings doesn't make much sense. So you'd essentially partition it this way so that theoretically you could put a second floor above that. Wouldn't be, I mean, you don't have to develop it right now, but the structure could be there with some, essentially supports. So that would be part of this original plan. Okay, gotcha. Okay, so essentially you'd be taking a preliminary step to develop the second stories.
I would hope that we could develop the whole second.
Yeah.
We do have need for administrative space, offices. We would be pulling out at least 6 offices or 4 offices at the bottom here in the green area, all of those offices. And we really, we need space for students downstairs. If we can move more people upstairs and make more room downstairs for different student areas,
Sure.
that would be wonderful.
Okay.
So then it's kind of purple, maybe a little blue. The vacated electronic spaces, that's where we're looking at putting science labs.
Mhm.
And then we have the vacated diesel program space, and we're taking that whole blue section down here. Diesel is in this area right now, but we would look at this whole different area and repurposing it.
Did you move the solar panels outside? Those out or somewhere? Is that off? Right outside the door is a whole raft of this solar panels, solar array.
There, I thought they were next door. by C building. I'll have to ask. I'm sure. Oh, you mean in the back? I thought we moved those out already. I'll have to look.
Maybe gone, it's been a year or so since.
Yeah, I think those are, you haven't seen solar panels at your window. It would have been right out there. No, I think we moved.
No,
them here.
off the top of the building, you mean?
No, they were
No, they
actually
were-
ground based.
We had a,
I remember saying, I
Around.
don't jump out, yeah, I'm not the most observant person in. on that.
You don't have time to look out the window.
Well, I'm usually in the clouds, but
So is there gonna be parking along that side or?
again, it's something that
Yeah.
we need to talk through, and talk about.
Because obviously parking is tight on that side, and if you have a classroom on that side, you hate to go in behind the back and.
it might be a scenario where we might make some staff parking to free up other spots in the main lot and then just, because it won't be very inviting, it'd be kind of more backdoor type of an entrance, but I mean, all that stuff comes with project and design, and this is kind of talking a little bit about by doing the transportation technology with the decisions that have been made with electronics, all that space is becoming available, so we need to figure out how to purpose it, and a lot of what you're hearing is trying to repurpose existing square footage and not just new builds as solutions every time we see an opportunity come up.
And these are cascading decisions. You can't make decision X till you make decision Y or, yeah.
So then with the last building, TRCD, and these are pictures from inside that building, renovating this building, and moving our high technology center from B building over to D building. And again, this building has the capacity where we could expand it for the program. So they have moved into the B building. They've been using it successfully. It's been a wonderful building. They've outgrown it. There is no way to expand that building without buying more property. And there's only one property next to it that we could expand into. We'd have to buy that. We've looked at it. It's not available and it's unlikely to be available anytime soon. The other thing is the parking. Students like to park close to where they're going in. And so we've had students parking on the street. We actually had Jackson County Sheriff's Office ask us to tell the students not to park there. They were going to tow their cars. And then the parking lot out in front of TRCA is very small. And so they're all trying to park there. So by moving them over to D building and making that big enough for them, that would be an amazing use of that building. The really cool thing about that building is it already has the electrical infrastructure that we would need. And as we're building the transportation center, we're creating that middle space where it will have the bathrooms in the student area for transportation, but it will be connected to TRCD. So both buildings can utilize that space together. So that's how we're kind of moving forward with that.
Yeah, I was wondering, I didn't remember those pictures and I realized I haven't been in that building.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool building. It is 2 stories.
Yeah.
In just this small area. So any questions on priority 2 or how we've gone on some of these from what we had in the bond project to kind of what we're moving forward with now on a smaller scale? So with that, our priority 3 project is RVCA building, and this is a building we currently have for sale. We haven't had any movement on this building. We've shown it multiple times over the years. With all of the changes we're talking about TRCA, it's going to be disruptive to classrooms or classes that are taking place in that building as we're making these remodels. We'll also be displacing offices and staff. And so having or being able to bring this back on in the short run to help alleviate some of that pressure would be an amazing idea. I know that it's 15 minutes away. There are some issues there, but again, this would be a great opportunity to be able to do that as we're remodeling. Long-term, how we'd use that building, we need to still have discussions of what that looks like. But as we're remodeling and moving things around in TRCA, we do need some additional space.
We've talked about that many times over the years. Aren't there some structural problems, both from an earthquake standpoint and a water problem and all kinds of issues with that building?
Yeah.
It's been there for a lot of years.
I believe the water, it was leaking at one point. I believe that we solved all of those issues. As far as bringing it up to current standards for seismic, thank you. We would need to look at that and see what that looks like.
Yeah, a lot of dollars involved in that, and it doesn't make sense to me. Obviously, it's just a preliminary, I mean, concept.
The concept.
Yeah, and priority 3 puts it out there a ways. But I'd hate to spend a ton of money in that we're never gonna get back if it's just, kind of a stopgap.
Yeah, it's on the market. We'll probably maintain it on the market. So if we get an offer we can't refuse, it'd be hard not to listen to it. But I think part of what we talked about was we're gonna be so disruptive at TRC that if it can serve to kind of mitigate that disruption, that would, be something that might be worth investigating. Because I don't think to be in there temporarily, I think we might be able to not, we don't have to do all full code things because we're not remodeling and some stuff like that.
Well, that was kind of my question. What the requirements that the city's gonna put on us if we're gonna rehabilitate that building, are we gonna have to do anything major?
So my understanding, and I will need to double check with Greg, but if we just move back in and we don't do any major remodels, we are not going to be required to address the seismic issues.
Wouldn't be a front of house operations. We wouldn't be inviting new students in there, but if some back of house people can
Sure,
work in
okay.
there, and that would.
Yeah, if a building collapses around them, that's okay.
Well, I think a lot of Southern Oregon's in trouble if the big one comes.
Okay, all right, thanks.
So basically next steps, there's still a lot to do, as we kind of talked about fleshing this out. And really looking at it. And some of the things I wanted to talk about was, our opportunity for our next grant from the state for capital. So we kind of went through that a little bit already. Again, we need to spend these funds for transportation, so we're eligible, and we really need to start looking and designing and being ready for these funds. And being ready to put a project together, because we have, when you look at priority 2, it's vamping space that we have, and how do we create a project out of that we then put together in a systematic way that will get approved, that will get funded, and that we can also then do a capital campaign around, something that makes sense. We need some time to design and put that together. So we're talking about it now and bringing it forward, and we'll keep talking about it. We do need to update that administrative procedure so we have more naming opportunities for more donors and people to invest into the college.
We're probably, I think if we're gonna go on the 27 to 29 biennium, I think we have to have that priority list for consideration probably by the end of 26.
Love it. We do.
Yeah, so you start thinking we're like 18 months away from trying to come up with what's gonna be a project that could be a $15 million match. These are the concepts we're talking about, but obviously you can see from the complexity of it, it's gonna take us a while to put it together and make it a project. That's why we want to put this in front of you. Like, we plan to work in this direction, not every I's dotted, not every T's crossed. But if you have feedback or thoughts of concerns with moving that direction, we would want to know now. So the goal is we're project ready, and we're not sitting like we are with transportation and sitting through multiple bienniums with the award, but not spending.
Sounds like in my mind, as I think about this, the capital projects or the capital facilities, maintenance and operations work is a body of work that will occur over time. This is a new body of work, a new set of solutions that are both short-term and long-term. I wonder if any thought has been given to merging these together so that we find the commonality of them and we thoughtfully put together something that's longer range so that those that come after us will put a bond on a measure on the ballot one day, will have found that there's been a roadmap of sorts. And it doesn't have to be, $100,000 consulting job. It could be a plan that just shows how these pieces fit together in a very 30,000 foot level. So that's, sort of a statement and a question.
Well, that kind of sounds like a master planning project.
Sort of.
And that has to, my understanding is we have to update that master plan at some point, you know, for each of the campuses. It's been a few years since we last looked at one.
Yeah, I
But
think
that's
the
kind of-
campus plans were developed before the pandemic, right? It was right before the pandemic or during.
We updated them when we redid the building, so the Allied Health Building at TRC, and I think we updated here before the pandemic.
Yeah, so I mean, today's education environment is quite a bit different even from those are, so 4 to 6 years
Oh, yeah.
probably since
Sure.
we've done those. And I think one of the reasons our college has been pretty successful the last couple of years is because we've been nimble and responsive. I don't think every decision we're making today was on the radar 2 years ago, but the community and industry stepped up and said, we want to prioritize, and we said we've got ability and capacity. So in some ways we want to do master planning, and in other ways we need to be nimble enough to say that when needs come and opportunities arise, we can pivot in that way, but that it's in line with where we're headed, not like, you know, if I use a program, I'll just put it out on record now. A lot of people have interest in hospitality and tourism. Really neat programs. The problem with them is they don't pay a living wage at entry. And so building up a program, having students take out student loans to go get the same wage that they would get if they didn't go get the education is us doing students a disservice. So we know when to say no to a program, but then if like within these pathways that we have, they say, we want you to add this component, it could fit into this equation. So I think there is kind of a roadmap, but part of the intentionality is like, in the preliminary projects that are Greg's report that he gave, like, these are the things we need to do in order to be responsible stewards. And then what Lisa and Cass were sharing today is, here's where our opportunities lie. This is what we want to be able to do to provide the best level of service to our community. So down the road will be conversations around where's the space or capacity or discussion around a future bond levy. Does that exist? These are the projects that would fit into that. Or, you know, if they're important enough and we can't get that, where does debt come into the equation? So we'll be able to talk through it. But I think what we're going to start looking at is how do you package that project that helps us leverage that state capital grant? That's where the schools that are moving the needle on their facilities are doing. I mean, the ones who are passing bonds are doing it a lot easier. But every time you can leverage that eligible funding, that match money you have, the more you get to move your campus ahead.
I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
But did the campus plan have a shelf life?
It seems to me that we were talking about, what, 5 to 8 years, something in that range?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's typical.
So it's still current. It's
It is, and if you actually look at like the Redwood Master Plan, what's on there is the transportation center.
this.
It's slightly different place, but it's still here. When you look at the Table Rock Master Plan, the Blue Room's been on there for as long as I can remember. Central and kind of doing something different has been something I've been in conversations over the last 15 since we've owned the building. So these
You
are,
didn't own the D building or 10 acres. Yeah.
that's the new area which we would want to incorporate, but we've been talking about this for the same concepts for a long time, slightly different, right? Because technology's changed and needs have changed. The transportation moving, building over there and then not putting it in A, and actually building something different. I mean, that opens up additional opportunities. So
We didn't have the importance of bringing a component of allied health back to Josephine County on that map, but realizing not having that created a void. So e-building became a project and got prioritized. You know, we received that congressionally directed spending to help with that. So some of that is what was in the plan and some of it was, well, while it wasn't in the plan, it's clearly evident today that we want to provide allied health training in Josephine County.
And does the state require any updates to the mass campus plan when you apply for grant money? Or there isn't a state requirement? So the college did it because it was good practice. It was best practice.
Yeah, it's best practice. You need to have a plan to, yes. Mhm.
So Gary, a master plan should never have a shelf life because it should never be in the shelf. It's always been-
True.
Most of them unfortunately are.
If you'd been here 6 years ago, we would have been talking about how do we buy the building next to the high tech center? Remember that?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
So it's other opportunities come up, so you change your priorities, how you look at stuff, and it's, yeah, it should never be in the shelf.
It's totally appropriate, but I remember we've, over the years, we've had a lot of discussions that one of them doesn't come up very often anymore. We talked about the need for some housing on the Redwood campus. Now, I know that's a sensitive subject that would kind of change the character of our whole campus over here. And it's not appropriate maybe to talk about in this environment, but that's one of the things that we had a lot of discussions about when we were putting those master plans together, saying, what do we really want to look at? You know, what we should look at, but should we be 20 years from now?
I don't think that conversation has died. I'll tell you, I've literally talked to a couple people in the community about what that would look like. And there's a couple different ways. There's models in which, right, you build campus owned housing. There's models where you do public-private partnership, where
Sure.
you say
Yeah.
you run it on our land.
Right.
I talked to a local investor and just say, you know, what kind of appetite do you think there'd be locally in this? And surprisingly, like a lot, when we talk about occupancy rates guaranteed and that. They're like, why wouldn't the colleges do it itself? I said, well, because we don't really want to be in the housing business.
Sure.
We want to be able to help fill housing, but we don't want to be in that business. It comes with its own restrictions here. But I think longer term, when we look at Redwood campus, because of its aesthetics and that, how it might have a more robust campus life is a longer term discussion. Now, I will tell you, some of that conversation was going on when I was here, and I heard a lot of or when I first arrived, and there were a lot of conversations around how can the college help solve the community's housing things, given you have students with housing? And I was like, well, just time out. There is a difference between community housing and student housing. Like, there are different needs, different expectations. And I said, I don't know that we belong in the community housing business. But working with folks on student housing is definitely something, but it does. I will tell you, one big step we've taken to help with that is we contracted campus security. I mean, we brought that in-house. So there's a lot, once you decide that you're gonna have people live on your campus, it's a lot different atmosphere. It comes with its opportunities, but there's challenges. So I think we want to talk about student life on Redwood
Sure.
campus in particular.
Yeah, it probably doesn't belong in this particular discussion.
Yeah.
Because this is more short term, but I was trying to get to Gary's point to say, let's not forget about that part.
Well, the fact that we're having these close together, even they're actually been calendared over the last year. I mean, I think about a year ago here at the Riverside campus when Greg came and he talked about that. That's what, over 18 months ago.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
timely and it is happening.
But nothing happens in the vacuum. There's a lot of stuff that happened. The E-building was phenomenal. You know, I remember walking there quite a while ago, and there's a chopped up maze, and now it's this wonderful medical facility somebody did a really good job on that.
A lot of people did a good job. Made that.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing over there.
I think what you'll see is Cass is going to come back with some things around the capital campaign for priority 1 projects. I will be coming back with the AP, and then I'm sure we're going to come back with an update every so often, at least every 6 months, of where we're at, what our priority projects look like. I can somehow bring the master plans that we have, reference those in these if that's helpful.
I didn't know we had one.
Okay,
So
so
being-
it would be helpful
it
then.
was just because my term on the board is what, maybe 2 or 3 years now, but it's new. I didn't know there was a campus.
You can re-up.
I will tie those things.
That would be nice to.
Yeah, so thank you for that opportunity. Yeah. Are there any other questions or anything, questions that we can answer for you?
Really nice job.
Yeah, and I mean, trust the experts. It looks very reasonable and like things we need to do, and I trust you all to tell us where to go with stuff.
Okay. Is there anything that got left out in the process, you know, things that maybe could have been considered, but you discarded them? you know, we haven't done anything, maybe we don't need anything in the other programs, you know, the classroom, the transfer degrees and whatever. It looks like we're in pretty good shape with that
I
stuff.
think what you're gonna see is when you look at the TRCA building and doing the blue room and what Diesel is vacating, that we're gonna have really good discussions around what do future program needs look like and be able to respond in ways like that. And
Mhm.
so we've already shown on Redwood with the multiple buildings, the ability to take a vacated building and bring it up to standards. And that's what's gonna try to happen with Autumn. So we try to backfill in that way. But I think really where what conversations aren't happening that need to, it will be an existing square. So, right, we talked just a little bit ago around the allied health classes on this campus are currently taught in the I building. Well, with them moving to E, I will now be vacated and good conversations will be going on around how might we best leverage that space that's becoming vacated. So they happen as space becomes available. And right now, the most unallocated space exists at Table Rock. So that's where to be determined will occur.
If moving Diesel out, you're gonna free up a ton
Yeah.
of space.
Yeah, and I want to say when this classroom space, not lab classroom, right? We're looking at the technology, but that wouldn't fall under capital
Yeah.
projects. So you'll hear us come forward what we're doing with technology as we move forward.
All right, we will then adjourn the special meeting of the board at 4:56 and we'll take a 4-minute recess.
Thank you.